come on, play my movie for me. Here's my Harry Potter. Did you say Harry Potter show? Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, they go to Harry Potter.
Okay, so what we want to do is we want Shelby to engage in a behavior.
Aren't you glad we have her here, guys?
We're not going to tell her the behavior though. We're only going to differentially reinforce her for successive approximations towards behavior we want. So say we picked her to go turn on the light switch over there. What we're going to do, it's kind of like hot coals. The closer she gets to that light switch and doing that behavior, the louder we're going to clap. The further away from that behavior she is, we're going to clap quieter. And when she gets closer, we're going to clap louder until finally she turns on the light. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? This is shaping using reinforcement, which is good because a lot of times we will be using clapping as reinforcement. So the light switch okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Which one it is? That one's on. It's that one over there that turns this light on.
Well, maybe we just want her to turn that light off.
Yeah.
Okay. We want her to turn the light off. Everybody clear on that one? All right, you ready?
She doesn't know.
You can do it.
You can do it. Go this way. Nobody's clapping.
Moving one way or the other, and then you'll.
You're right there.
That's awesome. Great job, Chloe. Hold on, for volunteering. Hold on, for volunteering here. Hold on here. You want a Twix or a Kit Kat? It doesn't matter. All right. So, what kind of reinforcement is this?
Positive.
Good. I'm adding something desirable. All right. To increase the likelihood of her doing what?
Turn on that light again.
No.
Doing what we want her to do.
Volunteering. Volunteering. All right. Okay.
That was hard too.
All right. I've been going for quite a while now. We'll take a little break. I don't have much else to.
I'm calling one of these three. It's time, guys.
Well, Melissa's not allowed to answer.
No. And I already talked about it.
All right.
And I already did my
I'm trying to think of the part. That thing like positive.
I don't want to know about the quantitative part. I just want it reinforcement defined. What it does. Good. What was that?
increases behavior.
Good. Increases behavior. Absolutely. Who wants to define punishment?
No,
Decreases behavior.
Absolutely. All right. You want Twix? Over here.
I'm good actually.
Yeah. Who said punishment?
I'm
You're good. No positive.
No,
All
I'll
right. All right.
We have
All right. So, who wants to take a stab at positive reinforcement?
Positive reinforcement is when you add something to increase the behavior.
Great job. Do you want a Twix or a Kit Kat? You okay? All right. Who wants?
This is
Now this is the hard. All right. All right. Who wants to go for negative reinforcement?
You take something away to reinforce behavior,
Good, which means
increase.
good. So we're going to take something away in order to increase behavior. Absolutely. All right, who wants to define positive? Did you want a Kit Kat or? Who wants to define positive punishment?
Positive punishment is a no.
Good. And basically you're adding something to what?
Decrease behavior.
Good. And all we're going to use for now is informational no. Okay? Who wants to go for negative punishment?
Taking something away to decrease behavior.
Great job. Great job. You want
I don't know.
You want another one? Well, we can just fill your cheeks up. Great. Another word for negative punishment, you might have heard before, is called response cost. Okay? That's another term for it. Or you can even consider it timeout. And what timeout is, and this is a big misconception about timeout, is timeout only works as if it's timeout from something the child likes. So if a child is tantruming because he's in circle time, and you remove him from circle time, and he didn't want to be in circle time, you're actually negatively reinforcing him for tantruming. Does that make sense? However, if the child likes circle time, and you remove him, it could be negative punishment. Okay? You're removing him from something he likes. So you have to be careful when doing things like timeout or negative punishment. You have to make sure that what you're doing is really removing him from something positive. Okay? Not removing him. Go ahead.
The negative punishment cost what?
Response cost.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Response cost. Another time, as Tyler gets older, we might move into what's called the token economy system. So he might start earning tokens, and if he engages in a problematic behavior like aggression or tantruming, we use response cost, which would be the removal of a token. We're removing something that he likes in order to decrease behavior. So it'd be, you need to keep your hands to yourself. You lose the token. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, you did a great job on that. Okay, since we talked about the four major consequences, right? Positive, negative reinforcement, positive, negative punishment. We talked about the three kinds of responses. Who can tell me what the three kinds of responses were?
Correct, incorrect, and non-responsive.
Absolutely. Now I want to talk, there's three variables that go along with a good SD. Does everybody remember what an SD is? Good, which is also synonymous with what word? Instruction. Right, instruction. So, there's three components to instruction that's going to be very important for us all to be consistent. Okay? And consistent is actually one of them. They're called the 3 C's. Alright? The 3 C's are clear, concise, and consistent. Okay?
What are they again?
Clear, concise, and consistent. So we know that our kids have a difficulty understanding language. So when we give our instruction, we want it to be clear, concise, and consistent so they can be successful. Okay? So we try to get rid of as much extraneous language as possible when we give our instruction. So if I wanted him to clap, I wouldn't say, "Hey buddy, can you clap your hands for me?" Does that make sense? That's a lot of language there. It's not really clear, concise of what we're going to do. And it's going to be difficult for us all to be consistent. If one person says, "Hey buddy, can you clap your hands? Let me see you clap your hands. What can you do with your hands?" All these different instructions can't be consistent. So we want to be clear, concise, and consistent, so it would just be clap. Does that make sense? We're going to reduce all that stuff. And as Tyler's able to start discriminating these instructions, we can start adding more language, and we call that generalization. But we first need them to discriminate on a simple level first before we can make it more complex for them. Because we want them to be successful. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So what are the 3 C's? Awesome. Awesome. So if I wanted Tyler to touch his nose, what would be the best SD for that?
No.
Touch nose. Great job. That's good. Nose would be the simplest one. And actually, if the child is having difficulty discriminating, we might just want to say nose. And it depends on the child. But touch nose would probably be the most accurate. Okay? Notice that we didn't say a pronoun. It wasn't touch your nose. It wasn't where's your nose. It was very concise. Touch nose. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. This is another very fun part here, which is called the functions of behavior. Very important to know what the function of a behavior is so you can give the correct consequence. Right? there are 4 major functions of behavior. This is all in your package too. The first one being attention seeking. Okay? You can either engage in desirable or an undesirable behavior that serve to gain the individual attention. Okay? So if I come up and hit you and then look in your eyes, what am I trying to do? Get your attention, right? It's attention-seeking behavior, right? So, very important to know that and being able to discriminate what kind of behavior a child is engaging in. Another one is access to a tangible, okay? So basically, if I say I'm hungry, which is a behavior, and someone gives me food, the function of that behavior was to get food, to get access to a tangible, or to express wants and needs, okay? It's very, you know, when a baby cries and you give them some food and they stop crying, obviously what was the function of the crying?
They were hungry. They wanted food.
They're trying to gain access to a tangible. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, another one is escape and avoidance. Okay, so like we were talking about before, if Tyler was in here and he wanted to get out of this room because he didn't like everybody looking at him and he engaged in a tantrum, what kind of behavior what would be the function of that behavior? To escape or avoid this situation, right? So it's very important. What kind of reinforcement wouldn't we want to do in that kind of situation? If he's tantruming because he wants to escape or avoid this situation, we wouldn't want to.
Take home the food.
Good, because that would negatively reinforce tantrum behavior, right? Okay. And we might see that today when we work with him in the chair. If the chair isn't a desirable place for him, he might tantrum, and I'm not going to be able to let him go from the chair because it could potentially negatively reinforce that behavior. So the next time he comes to the chair, what do you think he's going to do?
How do you physically keep him in the chair then?
Well, he's a pretty little guy, so the chair will be here, and I'll probably just have my legs on both sides of the chair here, and I'll just use passive guidance to keep him there. I'm not going to hold on to him tightly or anything like that. Probably keep him here, and he's going to have some leeway.
So you just kind of let him have a tantrum there
Exactly.
and just wait
And
till
then,
they're...
do you remember what it's called when that behavior increases before it decreases? Do you remember the term that I use?
Extinction burst.
Extinction burst. And we probably will see that, and it will probably get worse before it gets better until they realize, oh, this isn't getting me out of this situation, and I'll stop crying now. But remember, the longer that behavior has been reinforced, the longer an extinction burst will be. Just like the vending machine. I know, every time I've done this, it's worked. Why isn't it working now? And I'm going to try and fight my hardest for it to work, what used to work for me. Okay? Another one is sensory, and basically the function of sensory behaviors is the self-stimulatory behaviors. So the hand flapping, the verbal jargon, some kids toe walk.
He does toe walk.
Okay, some of these types of things, and it's sensory. There's really nothing in the environment that's contributing to it. These things are inherently reinforcing in themselves. And the best way to address those types of behaviors is what we call redirection. And we try to redirect with what's called DRI, which stands for Differential Reinforcement of Incompatible Behaviors. So if a kid's hand flapping, and you teach them to put their hands in their pocket, can they hand flap?
No.
No. Is it appropriate to have your hands in your pocket? Is it more appropriate to have your hands in your pocket than to hand flap? So what we do is we use differential reinforcement and redirection. So whenever they're hand flapping, we'd say, put your hands in your pocket, and then we'd reinforce, good, keeping your hands in your pocket, that's awesome, I like that, to where eventually this behavior gets stronger and this behavior gets weaker. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Now, the best consequence for attention-seeking behavior is going to be what we call extinction. Okay? And extinction is going to be basically, can be synonymous for you guys with the word ignore. Okay? So when he's in the chair and he's tantruming, I'm going to place that behavior on extinction. So I'm going to act like the behavior is not happening. Okay? But it doesn't mean I'm not going to try to find reinforceable behaviors. So what I can do is I can do a program which you're going to see, which is called nonverbal imitation, which is basically he's just going to imitate me, and I'm going to say do this and probably throw a block in the bucket. Now if he throws the block in the bucket, even though he's tantruming, he still complied to my instructions, so I can reinforce that behavior. great job, throwing the block in the bucket, that's awesome. But at the same time, I'm not addressing the tantrum at all. So I'm not saying you need to be quiet, no tantruming. I'm completely putting it on what we call extinction. I'm acting like he's not doing that. I'm keeping him here. I'm giving him instructions. If he's not getting the response I want from the instruction, I can prompt him and fade my prompts, but I'm going to act like the tantruming does not even happen. Okay? Because what happens is, if, say he's tantruming, okay, and I pick him up and I hug him, and I say, oh, it's okay, buddy. What kind of reinforcement am I providing for tantruming?
Positive.
Positive, why?
Because you're adding.
I'm adding something to the situation, which is going to increase the likelihood of him tantruming, right? What if I say, okay, buddy, you can go play, because he's tantruming? What kind of reinforcement now did I do? Negative, right? Because I'm removing him in the situation. So basically what extinction is removing positive and negative reinforcement. I'm not offering any reinforcement for that. I'm just ignoring it. But I am going to try to find reinforceable behaviors. So I'm going to try the block in the bucket, I'm going to try clapping, I'm going to try these other things that if he complies, he can get reinforcement for it. He can get good stuff for it. And I got some good stuff up my sleeve. I got rocket chairs and tickles. I got a whole bin out in my car of toy reinforcers and cool things like that. So I can find other behaviors to reinforce. But if he's not compliant to that stuff, I might just have to wait him out through what's called the extinction burst. Okay, hopefully it won't happen, but I just want to prepare everybody. It could happen. I know some people have a hard time with it. My little sister, I mentioned before, she tantrumed 6 hours at her first initial workshop. And the next workshop, the consultant actually, Eric Lopez, had to hide in the closet because she saw him, he started crying again. So we had to do like the next workshop from the closet to be productive. And then we eventually had to systematically desensitize her to it. But it happens, you know, and we all took turns getting in the chair and keeping her there through a tantrum and stuff like that. Just know that the request that I'm placing on Tyler isn't that demanding. I'm just asking him to sit there and reduce the problematic behavior, which would be tantrum, and maybe throw a block in the bucket. Okay, I'm not asking too much, and then he can go play. So basically, if I want to let him go play, which would be negative reinforcement, which might be the most effective reinforcement, he would have to do something that I request of him. So if he threw a block, I can say, "Good job throwing the block in the bucket." You can go play. So then maybe he learns, oh, I come over, I do one thing, and then I get to go play, and then we can systematically increase what's expected of him every time he comes over. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Now I talked to you guys a little bit about excesses and deficits. And I want to show you how those are interrelated, because a lot of times excesses come from deficits. So like I said before, if you engage in verbal self-stimulatory behavior, which is just babbling, maybe it's because you have a lack of communication skills, so you're not able to talk appropriately, so you're going to engage in these behaviors more. Does that make sense? So say that I have trouble expressing my wants and needs, and I'm trying to tell you I'm hungry, but I can't say I'm hungry, so I just start crying. So that would be an excess, tantruming, because of this deficit. So what I'd like to do right now, I'd like to get into groups of 3 if we could. And what we're going to do is kind of like Pictionary, and I want one person to draw, and I have a list here of things, one person to guess, and one person to just take some notes on the behavior of the 2 people trying to communicate through drawing. So I can show you, when language is a deficit, what kind of behaviors come out of that kind of interaction. Okay?
I am not going to take notes. No, make Mom take notes because
You feel better.
no, you're taking notes. I will draw.
Okay, go ahead. So you can actually do it together.
You guys come together and jump out. No, it can be our third.
How many groups do we have?
3, 4,
4.
3.5.
Okay. Who's the drawer over here? You're the drawer? Okay, don't start yet.
Okay, I'll draw. You want to draw? Like draw?
Okay.
Draw? No.
I can fucking draw. I don't like charades, but I draw.
Who's drawing?
I'll draw.
All right. Don't look at it yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
I'm gonna draw in here.
I like this one. Who's drawing? All right, you're drawing. All right. You gonna play too?
Well, it's just the 3.
You want to get in this group so you kind of want?
Draw.
Okay. This is a good one for him.
You gonna draw, Noah?
All right. You guys can just watch. Alright, is everybody ready?
So we can't say anything, we can just draw.
Yeah, we can't say
You take
anything,
notes.
and someone's got to take notes on behavior. So I want to know what kind of behaviors are going on.
Notes on our behavior.
Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, go ahead.
Take notes. Okay, but
Okay, we don't want anybody else to say.
you gotta go.
Wait, no, they can't see. Only you can see.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
So we're supposed to guess what you draw.
Yes.
She's supposed to
Guess
guess,
what
you're
you're
gonna take
drawing.
notes on our behavior.
Only one person guess, only one person draw. The other person note what's happening between the two trying to communicate.
A girl.
We go?
Yeah, go ahead.
But don't show us. We'll peek.
Now, do we draw like anything, or do we have to base it on Tyler?
Tree.
No. Just draw whatever the word is.
Okay.
Is it a girl? A boy?
It's kind of like campfire.
A woman?
It's not a
I'm
person.
guessing.
Falling from the tree.
It's not a person? Well, that is a person, Joe. Leaves
Grimaces.
lots of box.
Oh, maybe I I'm sorry. Branches. No.
What does that say?
Laughing.
Keep going.
Acorn.
A girl? A girl plus?
He's supposed to get it, not me.
I know, I'm sorry.
Falling from the tree. It's something that fell from the tree. Like rain.
I picked the hardest one just because it's funny. I don't even know how to draw some of these things.
Apple. It's not apple. It's
I know what
It's
I'm really
frustrating.
good.
Let me know when everybody has at least 3 behaviors. Okay?
I'm sure
Whoever's-
we're 10 over here.
Yeah, 10 behaviors? You're good over there?
Oh my God, I'm really tired.
You're doing pretty good, man. You know your geography. Water fountain?
God, well, not Idaho. It's not Utah.
Is there something else that's on the thing that fell? Like wood?
No, we're-
Decorating. Okay.
It's not Wisconsin.
You have 3 behaviors, Melissa?
Yes.
Grandpa, you have 3 behaviors?
I don't know. Not really.
Yeah, probably.
What state? See, there's Washington.
She's exhibits so many behaviors over here. I'm watching. She's flipping through the pages. Laughing.
Drawing, he's not good.
ABCs?
Hold on.
Eating.
Box?
Um,
You're stacking the box.
No.
You keep drawing a girl.
an acorn.
A woman.
What's hard?
Teacher.
Like a coconut.
It's funny, this is the most applicable one right here.
Like a coconut.
That's normal.
Are we good? Okay, I think we're good. Alright, you guys can tell.
Oh, my favorite.
You can show yours. You can show it. You can show it.
I know.
Want. Want to. Which is what our kids are trying to express all the time. This is want.
I was thinking about it. Why did you put Starbucks at the top?
Alright, let's regroup, and I'd like if the person who is taking notes on behavior to kind of list some of the behaviors. We can start with Melissa. You guys are so funny.
Oh, that's frustrating. Did anybody get theirs?
No.
No, nobody did.
It's hard words.
Mine was easy.
No, want is actually really hard because that's what our kids are trying to express most of the time when they get frustrated, is saying, I want something, and they can't express it. It's
Yeah, how
very
do you
difficult.
draw want?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Shelby wants Starbucks.
You knew what it meant.
Well, I think.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to list my behaviors. Alana was
hesitated at first trying to think of what to draw, and she started drawing slowly. She was grimacing with her face, putting her hands out, shaking her head, or yes or no, when he was getting closer. Matt was watching very closely. He had his hand on his chin thinking. They both were laughing. And he's pointing, trying to think of the states and where they are and the geographic locations, and he's doing some pointing.
So a lot of physical behaviors increase. Okay, excellent. Grandpa? And I can't wait to hear these. That'd be awesome. Montana.
Yeah, it was like great.
You did pretty good. I heard him say Wyoming.
He was naming them all up.
Okay, building on what she said, there was, what I noticed is very attentive, both drawer and guesser responding, feeding on each other's reaction. A lot of creativity at the start, trying to figure out where it was going. A lot of physical interaction, and then it slowly started dropping off as the frustration level started going out when they weren't communicating very effectively.
Right.
And then there was pauses where neither one could figure out what the other was going and who was going to take the lead on this one. And that's kind of where it ended.
Right. And I saw a lot of hand clapping over here, some dancing, saw some of this. So we see that a lot of times in our kids, and we might mistake it for self-stimulatory behavior and all these other things, which they are. Obviously, doing this is reducing some of the tension for the people engaging in those behaviors. So excellent job. Excellent job. All right, Shelby. Let's hear it.
Just having the giggles and being silly.
Right, being silly, which our kids do
Especially
a
when
lot.
not getting the answer, then it just made her kind of laugh and giggle even more.
Right.
Obviously, the frustration level kind of sped up exponentially. She started giving up, tearing the papers off, starting over again.
Right, excellent, excellent. Which those are behaviors that we see with our kids.
behavior?
He was pretty mellow. I was watching him. He was kind of just like,
That's him!
so we see that kind of behavior a lot with our kids, where they might just start laughing uncontrollably or engaging in a lot of physical behaviors, frustration, kicking things, ripping things. I just want everybody to be aware of that stuff because you're going to see those behaviors, and that's one of the reasons why we try to keep our kids at 80% successful. So after they're wrong a couple times, we are going to provide support because we don't want to see those types of behaviors escalate. Okay, we want to keep them very successful. All right, and just to let you know, I'm going to start probing out some programs here after lunch. I'm going to start below Tyler's skill level so that we can start very successfully. So I'm going to probe a lot of things today and come up with a curriculum for us. Probably this afternoon, since we got through the morning so well. Everybody, or not everybody, but some of you will be able to get a chance to get in the chair maybe and do some of this stuff. But I am going to start below his skill level so that he's successful. So some very simple tasks like throwing a block in a bucket, which we know that he can do if he can pack all his toys in his suitcase. But it's just a matter of establishing compliance. So him learning that if I give an instruction, you need to comply in order to receive reinforcement. And getting him used to coming over to the chair. Our instruction to get him in the chair, or the SD to get him to the chair, is going to be come here. And for him to leave the chair is going to be go play. So we're going to need to establish that as well. So getting him to come over, receiving reinforcement, getting to go play, and then systematically increasing the complexity of what's expected of him when he comes over to the chair. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about what we've discussed? What do you think the function of the behavior was when she did this?
You're wrong.
Do you know? Do you remember?
Frustration.
But hold on, we have 4 functions. Let me tell you again. Attention seeking, access, or communicate, want, and need, or escape and avoidance, or sensory.
Communicate want and need.
Good. Excellent. So almost all these behaviors respond at trying to express or communicate and having difficulty doing so. So that was the function of that behavior. And frustration is pretty much the same. Same thing. Same thing. All right. Now, what if we were to say, you know what? And when she did this, if we were to go, you know what? You don't have to do this anymore. What do you think would happen next time she was put in a situation where she would have to do the same thing? Exactly, because we would have negatively reinforced that with removing those demands. So it's very important if you give an instruction that you follow through. So if I say, I noticed Tyler was over here with Shelby, and she was trying to get him to sit here on her lap, and he kept trying to get away and go. So the next time she tries to have Tyler sit on her lap, he might try to engage in that same behavior because it actually got reinforced because he eventually did get let go. So just be careful that even removal of demands, so like if I said come here, and he walked away and didn't listen to me, and I was like, oh, you must not want to come here right now. That it's going to increase the likelihood the next time I say come here, him not responding. So what we're going to do is say come here, no, come here, and help him over. And then, once he sits down, good job, might let him go play, and then try come here again. Come here. And see if he can do it on his own. Because remember, if we put in a prompt, we want to try to take out a prompt and increase independence. Otherwise, it'll just be prompt dependent. And we'll have to go and say, come here, every single time. Okay? When I get into programs today, there's going to be some major domains that I'm going to be going over. There's basically 4. In our outline, Melissa says 3, but I'm adding matching as a separate domain. The major domains that we're going to be focusing on, language, for one, has 2 components. Okay? Receptive language is receiving information. So if I said touch nose, all Tyler has to do is receive that information and comply. He doesn't have to say anything, he just has to receive it. Okay? And then comply. We call that receptive language. Expressive language, I would say, what is it? And he'd have to say, nose. Because he's expressing, he's outputting information. Does that make sense to everybody? So receptive is receiving information, expressive is outputting information. Okay? The next one is imitation. So what if I didn't want him to receive information or output information, I just wanted him to imitate something I modeled. So I'd just say, do this, and he would just have to imitate me. Right? Does that make sense to everybody? Or I said, do this, and he just had to model me or imitate me versus clap. If I told him to clap and he clapped, what would that be? What would it? No, I'm just telling him to clap. Would it be receptive or expressive language?
Receptive.
Good, because he doesn't have to say anything. I just say clap, he receives information, he does. What if I said, what am I doing?
Expressive.
Good, he'd have to say clapping. He would have to output information. What if I just said, do this? And he imitated me. What would that be? I just gave it to you. What would it be?
Imitation.
Imitation. Excellent. So those are the 3 major domains. And then another one that we add in here is just called matching. So basically, I'm going to have some items on the table, say blue, red, and yellow. And I'm going to hand him blue, and I'm going to say match. Or put the same. And he's just going to have to match blue to blue. Okay? Versus if I had those 3 colors out there and I said, touch blue. He had to touch blue. What would that be?
Receptive.
Great job. What if I said, what color?
The second.
Expressive. Great job. What if I said, do this?
Imitation.
Imitation. Good. Excellent. What if I said, pull with blue?
Matching.
Good. Excellent. Or pull with same. Or match. Absolutely. Does that make sense? So when I go through some of these programs today, I'm going to want you guys to be able to identify whether it was a receptive program, an expressive program, an imitation program, or a matching program. Okay? Under imitation, there are 2 types of imitation. There's nonverbal imitation, which is the ones I've been modeling for you. So do this. Okay? He doesn't have to say anything, he just has to imitate what I'm doing. The other is called verbal imitation, and that's where I'm going to want him to imitate what I say. So I'd say car, and he'd have to say car. Okay? It's kind of like expressive. I can see I can get confused because he is outputting information, but he's just imitating me. He's not generating an expressive response. If I held up a picture of car and said, what is it? And he said car, that would be expressive. But if I just said, say car, he's just imitating me verbally. Does that make sense to everybody? So nonverbal imitation and verbal imitation. Those are our 2 types of imitation. Okay? Now receptively, when I'm telling him to come over, when I say come here, that's what we call a receptive instruction. I'm giving him information, he's receiving it, and he's complying. Same with the go play. So be thinking about that any time that you're giving Tyler an instruction, you're working on receptive language. anytime you ask Tyler a question and you expect a verbal response, you're probably working on expressive language. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Excellent. Make sure that I haven't missed anything. Okay. So just some extra terms that I'd like to go over with you guys that have to do with operant conditions. This is in your packet too, I'm sure. When I talk about a stimulus or stimuli, I'm talking about an object or an event that may influence a behavior. So when I put those colors out on the table, we call that stimuli. If we're doing a program called block imitation and we're working with blocks, the blocks are the stimuli. So all the materials that you're going to be using to teach Tyler are going to be called stimuli. Okay? Or one would be a stimulus. Okay? And everybody to be familiar with that. I went over all these things. All right. For you. This is just a question for you. Define reinforcement.
Where I ask him something and he does it. I don't.
It's okay. I put you on the spot. What does reinforcement do?
Reinforces him to do something I want him to do.
But what does reinforcement actually do? You want a hint? I'll give you one. Does it increase or decrease behavior?
Increases behavior.
Good. Excellent. What does punishment do?
It's when you tell, it increases behavior. When you tell no,
Right? And it does what to the behavior?
it decreases the behavior.
Good. So reinforce. That's why I picked you. I want you to really know this. Reinforcement by definition increases behavior. Punishment by definition decreases behavior.
Okay.
So if you notice that what you're doing is increasing a behavior the next time that he's put in that situation, then you know that you're reinforcing it. If the next time he's done that situation and the behavior doesn't happen, then you've decreased it. You've used an effective punisher. Okay? Now, the reason why this is a little counter to it, this is why I brought it up, is because of the extinction verse. Now, when you say no, what's going to happen first? Behaviors are going to go up, right? So it's kind of funny that punishment is supposed to decrease behavior, but initially it increases behavior, and I think that that's why you're having difficulty. But an effective punisher, by definition, is supposed to increase behavior. Decrease behavior. But it could happen that it increases initially because they've received so much reinforcement for it before. Okay? That might be why you're having a little difficulty with it. Alright, so do you remember what we're doing if we're negatively reinforcing behavior? Are we adding something positive or taking something that they don't like away?
Taking something away.
Good, exactly. And it's still going to increase the behavior. So removal of demands, removal from a situation. So if I'm asking him to do something and he's not paying attention and I just stop asking, basically by removing my demands, I've negatively reinforced that behavior.
Right.
Okay? It's very important to understand. It's probably the most trickiest thing that we'll ever talk about is positive and negative reinforcement. It's kind of counterintuitive to understand, but I want to make sure that everybody knows because it's the one that happens the most frequently, and it's the one that maintains a lot of problematic behaviors. We don't like to see our kids cry, so we either positively reinforce them by giving them stuff so they stop crying, or we remove them from situations that they don't like to reduce those behaviors. Because we don't like it. We don't like to see our kids cry, and it's understandable. But someone gave me this analogy that when you take a child to the doctor to get a shot, they don't really like the shot, but you know that that's what they need. And that's kind of what this is. When you have to sit out an extinction verse or follow through with behaviors, it might not be what they like at the time, and they might tantrum and fight us and cry through it, but it's what they need in order to become functional and understand their environment. Okay? It's very, very important. And I think I got through that in record time. So I get some reinforcement. Yeah. All right.
You can have a Twix.
Yes. Are there any questions? Yes.
Actually, when you're waiting out the extinction burst and they're having this tantrum, what exactly should you be doing to calm them down?
Great question. Great question. Remember I told you that I was going to try to find reinforceable behaviors. So if I have them do a behavior that's kind of incompatible with flopping all over the place and hitting and crying, I can say, do this and put a block in a bucket. The minute he puts a block in a bucket, I found a reinforceable behavior. He complied. Great job! He's going to get reinforcement, and I guarantee the minute he receives reinforcement, he's going to be like, oh, that was awesome. Let me do that again. Sometimes you don't even have to do the next block. They're just like, yay! And people are going to be clapping. He's going to have a good time. He's okay with that, right? Clapping? Okay, good.
He likes
Okay, good.
really animated.
So what we're going to do is we're going to act like the tantrum is not happening, but give demands so that we can bring about reinforceable behaviors. Does that make sense? So the minute he puts a block in a bucket, I'm going to give him lots of reinforcement. He's going to have to figure out what he got reinforcement for because he didn't get reinforcement for the tantrum. He got reinforcement for putting a block in the bucket.
But Tyler's the type, when you do reinforce them, he's going to want you to do it over and over.
Great! That's awesome! That's what we want!
It just reminded me of him jumping off the
Off the thing.
off the
And he waits
fireplace,
for you to
and then he
clap.
waits for you to clap when he does that. So and we could sit there for
Okay,
a half
what is
hour.
the function of that behavior?
I just wanted him to learn.
Hold on. I got 4 functions here. I got 4
I don't know
functions.
what the function
Let me tell you. I'll tell you again. I'll tell you again. This is good. This is good stuff.
Pay
Okay.
attention.
What was the function of that? Okay, here's our functions. You ready? Attention seeking, access to a tangible, escape and avoidance, or sensory.
Attention seeking.
Great. So, what would be the best way to reduce that behavior?
But we taught him that behavior.
Okay, that's fine, but if you wanted to reduce it, what would you do?
Stopping.
Ignore it.
Exactly, which we call extinction. So we remove attention. What are you going to see happen first when you remove attention? Not necessarily a tantrum, but he's going to probably do it like 20 times until he realizes no one's paying attention to me. I'm going to go find something else to do. You know? So, I mean, and a lot of times it's time consuming and you're going to be like, oh, but you're going to have to follow through. What typically happens is when we start this procedure, kids typically get reinforced at the height of their extinction burst because you eventually have had enough. And it's very important not to reinforce there because the next time that happens, they're just going to start there. So you have to make sure, and you'll see, it's so easy to plot this. I'm nerdy, I'm all statistics. This is the way an extinction burst works. So here's the baseline behavior, so it's happening pretty frequently. Then you remove reinforcement for it. You see it spike like that. I mean, it's pretty severe, but it's not a gradual reduction, it's straight down. And once it heightens, if you don't reinforce at this heightened part, it drops right off. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. But depending on how much reinforcement they got at this level, so if he got claps all the time, every time he jumped off that, if he got claps, when you remove reinforcement, this extinction burst is going to be pretty high. And then it will eventually drop off. But you have to make sure, because if you reinforce here, by going, all right, I had enough. Yay, good job. You know, after doing that, what's going to happen is the next time, he's not going to start here. He's going to start here. And you got to be really, really careful about that. Okay? With all behaviors, tantrum behaviors, attention-seeking behaviors, escape and avoidance behaviors, all of those. Okay? Great question. That's awesome. Want Twix? Kit Kat?
I'm still good.
Okay.
But thanks.
Just trying to positively increase the likelihood of that behavior happening again. Any other questions? I know you got
So
it.
I'm just curious, so what does a parent do, like the example in the grocery store, if they're having a tantrum really bad, laying on the floor, and just thinking of that example. Just wait there until it's over. Just don't say
You can do several
anything,
things. You can do several things. Okay? That would be one. Which is great. It's awesome. But is it likely that that could happen? Are you going to be able to do that with people staring at you? Probably not. Right? So what you want to do is know that when you're going to go, I would plan trips to stores that you know you're not going to go shopping. Okay? So the minute he tantrums for a toy, you can leave. and you're not worried about not getting your grocery shopping done because you went there specifically to target this behavior. So when you start a tantrum, it's no, and you leave. And I guarantee a couple times of that, he'll learn that you don't always get what you want in the grocery store. Does that make sense? So yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that he always does that. I just have friends that have said that about their kids. I'm always
Absolutely.
curious
Well,
about.
I'll give you a
Elizabeth.
pretty funny. This is a pretty funny one. My little sister was tantruming at the store. We were going through an extinction burst. My mom was there, and this lady looked at my mom and was like, "That kid is so spoiled," and they had no idea. That's the funniest thing about it. People just sit there and judge, but they have no idea. And my mom just said, "Yep, you're right," and that's it. You know, not everybody can do that. I was pretty proud of her. But, yep, you're right. And just kept following through with her putting it on extinction, you know. But I know that it's not always possible, and that's why I say pick your battles. Much better for you to say, when I go this time, he is going to get the toy. He is going to get it. Versus, I'm going to go this time, and I know I'm not going to shop. He's not going to get the toy, and if he tantrums, we're going to leave. So know beforehand whether or not he's going to get the toy and what you're going to do if the behavior happens. Be proactive, not reactive. Does that make sense? Okay. And that'd be the best advice that I could give. Know that I'm going to take a planned visit to the store where he's not going to get anything and I'm prepared to leave, or I got to get some grocery shopping done, so I'm going to buy him the toy this time. That way, he gets the toy, you don't even have to deal with the protest. You know what I'm saying? Or he's not going to get the toy and I'm going to focus on the protest. Okay? I think that's pretty good advice. All right. Any other questions? You got one?
No,
No, not yet?
I'm not good at the questions right now yet.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Great job, everybody. Big clap. Big clap for reinforcement. All right. Actually, I did have two other things since we have time. Just want to talk about a little bit more about reinforcement. There's two kinds of reinforcement besides the positive and negative. One's called primary and one's called secondary. And this is pretty easy. Primary is just unlearned reinforcement. So food, you don't really have to learn that it's reinforcing. You need it to survive. Water, these types of things are reinforcing. As far as praise goes and claps and tickles and stuff like that, we call that secondary reinforcement because you have to learn that that's good. And it sounds like Tyler already likes that stuff, which is putting us ahead of the game. A lot of our kids, we have to start with primary reinforcers like M&Ms and things like that because they haven't learned that tickles and being thrown around in physical play is fun.
Oh, the candy's up there.
Primary works too, but know that. But secondary reinforcement is more natural and it's easier to provide. It's much easier to say, "Hey, buddy, I like how you did that." Anybody can give that kind of reinforcement. You don't always have a Skittle in your pocket and stuff like that, so we want to try to get to as many secondary reinforcers as possible. And I will provide a list of really cool secondary reinforcers: laundry basket, airlines, and rocket chair, Harry Potter broom ride, and all that stuff. And also toys are a secondary reinforcer too.
I am not doing that. No way. And laundry basket hats?
Yeah, we go right downstairs, right?
That'd be cool.
No, you get from the laundry basket, you have to lift them up and...
Alright, that's the last. We can break for lunch now.
Okay, I've got sandwiches,
You get to keep that
vegetables,
too.
fruit still out there.
Get your goddamn pen.
Pretzels,